Thyroid gland. It's an important endocrine gland that is located in the neck region, and it performs important role in body metabolism. So basically thyroid gland is located in the neck region as shown here. It is located basically in front of the trachea, and it has important role in body metabolism. Metabolism is basically process by which body converts food into energy. Important hormones produced by thyroid gland include thyroid hormones and calcitonin. Basically, thyroid hormones include T3 and T4. T3 has 3 iodine molecules, that is why it's known as triiodothyronine, and T4 has 4 iodine molecules, so it is known as tetraiodothyronine. And another hormones apart from thyroid hormone is calcitonin. It is also produced by thyroid gland. Now, calcitonin does not has a role in metabolism. It has a role in calcium homeostasis, calcium balance in the body. Whereas thyroid hormones, which includes T3 and T4, has important role in metabolism. As we said that thyroid gland is located in the neck region. So here we have thyroid gland, and it is located in the neck region in front of the trachea. You can see this is trachea. In front of the trachea, here we have thyroid gland, and the structure of thyroid gland now includes two lobes. You can see here is the right lobe of the thyroid gland, and here we have the left lobe of the thyroid gland, and both these lobes are connected by means of a middle structure which is known as isthmus. So you have a right lobe, you have a left lobe, and isthmus connecting these two lobes of the thyroid gland. So this is a butterfly shaped structure of the thyroid gland. And then we can discuss about the basic histology of the thyroid gland also, because to understand the hormone synthesis, understanding the histology of thyroid gland is also important. Now, thyroid histology comprises of thyroid follicles. Here you can see these are thyroid follicles, and we also have parafollicular cells. In between the thyroid follicles we have parafollicular cells. You can see here we have parafollicular cells, also known as C cells. These are between these thyroid follicles. So these large structures, these are thyroid follicles, which makes up the bulk of the thyroid gland. And then in between these we have parafollicular cells. These are parafollicular cells in between the thyroid follicles. Parafollicular cells are also known as C cells. It is basically these parafollicular or C cells which makes calcitonin. We said that thyroid gland makes up calcitonin also apart from the thyroid hormones, and the thyroid hormone is basically synthesized by these follicular cells. And these thyroid follicles basically has follicular cells, and these are cuboidal in nature. You can see cuboidal nature of the cuboidal shaped cells. These are arranged in this circular pattern, and they enclose a lumen. This lumen is filled up with colloid, and this colloid basically comprises of protein molecule known as thyroglobulin. Bulk of the lumen of thyroid follicle is made up of thyroglobulin. This is important to know because ultimately this thyroglobulin has a very important role in the synthesis of thyroid hormones that we will discuss later. So the basic structure comprises of thyroid gland comprises of the thyroid follicles, and in between thyroid follicles we have parafollicular cells. Parafollicular, also known as C cells, these makes up the calcitonin hormone, whereas the thyroid follicular cells makes up the thyroid hormones. Your T3 and T4 are made up by thyroid follicles. And here you can also see the blood capillaries. When thyroid hormone is made, it will be then transferred to these blood vessels. Then proceeding forward, we have feedback loop mechanism for control of the thyroid hormones from thyroid gland. This feedback loop mechanism comprises of hypothalamus. First of all, releases the thyrotropin releasing hormone, which controls the anterior pituitary, and then in response to thyrotropin releasing hormone from anterior pituitary, we have thyroid stimulating hormone which is released, and this thyroid stimulating hormone then acts on the thyroid gland, which then causes the release of T3 and T4, your thyroid hormones. And remember, once you have sufficient quantity of T3 and T4, inhibitory negative feedback mechanism will be sent by these products. This thyroid hormone will then send a negative feedback to stop the further synthesis of thyrotropin releasing hormone from hypothalamus, and also from the anterior pituitary TSH will be stopped. You can see inhibitory feedback by these thyroid hormones. Remember, positive signal may also be sent in case, for example, you have less T3 and T4. Hypothalamus will be stimulated in those cases. This is known as positive feedback, where hypothalamus causes increased release of thyrotropin releasing hormone, which then stimulates your anterior pituitary, and then anterior pituitary releases thyroid-stimulating hormone, and which stimulates thyroid to ultimately release your thyroid hormone. So you can have both positive and negative feedback loop mechanism. So this is important in controlled release for thyroid hormone. Then we can discuss the functions of thyroid hormones. So thyroid hormones have various functions starting from the brain. It can affect the brain functions and mood. So in cases where thyroid hormones is, for example, less high in hypothyroidism, you have less thyroid hormone synthesis. In hyperthyroidism, you have high amount of thyroid hormones. In hypothyroidism, when you have less thyroid hormones, for example, congenital hypothyroidism, where by birth thyroid hormone is less produced, in those cases the brain development is affected. So that means that thyroid hormone does have a role in brain functions. It also has a role in affecting the functions of eyes. It affects the nerves and muscles related to the eyes. So in hyperthyroidism, for example, goiter is an autoimmune hyperthyroid condition in which eyes are affected. So thyroid hormone maintains the nerves and muscles related to the eyes. It affects the heart rate and functions. For example, in cases where you have less thyroid hormone like hypothyroidism, your heart rate is less. In people who have hyperthyroidism, where you have high amount of thyroid hormone, they have high heart rate, which is known as tachycardia. Then we have lung. It can affect the breathing rate of the people, and it has a role in regulating liver function. Thyroid hormone can cause increased release of glucose from liver. That's why we said that thyroid hormone has a role in metabolism. It has a role in utilizing the energy from the digestive system. Thyroid hormone also affects the motility of the digestive tract. Therefore, in hyperthyroidism, where we have high amount of thyroid, the gut motility, that is digestive system motility, can increase in those cases. Consequently, in hypothyroidism, people have constipation because of less thyroid hormone. The motility of gastrointestinal tract is decreased. So this is how thyroid hormone levels, that is high or low, can affect all functions of all these areas. And upon reproductive system, yes, thyroid hormone does affect the functioning of reproductive system. Therefore, in cases where you have less thyroid hormone or high thyroid hormone, reproductive functions, specifically in females, the cycles can be disturbed in disturbance of the levels of thyroid hormones. Then thyroid hormone also has a role in controlling the musculoskeletal growth and affects the skin also, growth and development of the skin. So overall, the functions of thyroid hormone can be memorized by seeing this figure. Just keep in your mind that it affects your brain and skeletal muscle growth and development. It affects your heart rate, it affects your eyes, it affects the digestive system, it affects the metabolic functions of the liver, and it also has a role in affecting your functions of reproductive system. So this is just an overview of all the important functions of thyroid hormones. Then we can discuss the synthesis of thyroid. Steps of thyroid hormone synthesis include iodide trapping, then we have oxidation of the iodide into iodine, then we have organification, then we have coupling, and finally we have endocytosis, and then proteolysis and release of thyroid hormones from the thyroid follicles. I will explain all these steps one by one in a diagram in the next slides. As we said that the first step in thyroid hormone synthesis is iodide trapping. Iodide trapping means that the dietary iodide, for example, will come via blood, and then this will be transported into the lumen of the follicular cell. Remember, this is follicular cell and this is lumen of the follicular cell, where we said that colloid and thyroglobulin is present, which makes up the bulk of the colloid, which makes up the lumen of the follicular cells, which we showed previously. And this is, for example, plasma from the blood. Iodide will come and it will be transferred into the follicular lumen. This iodide transfer require a transporter known as sodium iodide symporter. Sodium and iodide are transported along both at the same time, sodium and iodide, and this iodide is transferred then inside. This step is known as iodide trapping, by which iodide is transferred from blood into the follicular cell. Then in the second step, iodide is basically oxidized. This step is known as oxidation step, as we said, and iodide will be oxidized into the iodine, and then iodine will be transferred to the lumen. Okay, so basically some sources say that basically this oxidation process, which is iodide to iodine conversion, take place in the lumen of the follicular cell. So we can also shift this here, but for convenience we can write it here. Then once you have iodine and this transfer of iodide to iodine conversion into the lumen of the follicular cell requires a special transporter which is known as pendant. This is basically chloride iodide transporter. So we had one transporter here, sodium iodide symporter, and we have another transporter here, which is, in this case you have chloride and iodide transporter, which will transfer the iodide inside the lumen, and then iodide will be converted to iodine by means of oxidation, which is the second step. Once iodide is converted into iodine, the third step is iodination. Iodination of the tyrosine residues of the thyroglobulin will occur. This thyroglobulin comes from the follicular cell. Follicular cell has basically endoplasmic reticulum and Golgi apparatus, which synthesizes thyroglobulin, and this thyroglobulin then sent to the lumen of the follicular cell, which makes up the colloid or lumen of the follicular cell. And this thyroglobulin has an important amino acid, which is tyrosine. This has a role in formation of your thyroid hormone. How? The tyrosine is linked to the thyroglobulin because it is a part of thyroglobulin, and this tyrosine, which is provided by the thyroglobulin, will be then iodinated. That is, iodine will be attached to the tyrosine. This step is known as organification. As we discussed previously, the third step was organification. The first step was iodide trapping. Simply iodide came inside follicular cell. The second step was oxidation, where iodide was converted into iodine, and then third step was iodination of the tyrosine residue of the thyroglobulin. Iodination of the tyrosine basically forms your monoiodotyrosine. Monoiodo means single iodine combines with the tyrosine part of the thyroglobulin. The tyrosine is basically an amino acid. This forms monoiodotyrosine. And if two iodine molecules combine with the tyrosine amino acid, this will form diiodotyrosine, as the name indicates. So you have monoiodotyrosine, you have diiodotyrosine. Then if one monoiodotyrosine combines with the one diiodotyrosine, so you will have 1 plus 2, that will make 3, that is triiodothyronine will be formed. If two diiodotyrosine combine, this will form tetraiodothyronine. You can see T4. So this is how T3 and T4 is formed. This step is basically coupling. When the monoiodotyrosine and diiodotyrosine or two diiodotyrosine combines, they form T3 and T4 respectively, and this step is known as coupling because they combine. You see, this step is coupling. So the first step we said was iodide trapping, second was oxidation, and third step was iodination of the tyrosine, which forms MIT and DIT, that is monoiodotyrosine and diiodotyrosine, and then MIT DIT combine, or DIT and DIT combine, forming T4 and T3. These are basically thyroid hormones, but remember, they are here attached to the thyroglobulin. So, and they are in the lumen of the follicular cell. So they need to be transported first into the follicular cell, and then they will be transferred into the blood. So this requires a process of endocytosis. So from follicular lumen, endocytosis from follicular lumen into the follicular cell of these thyroid hormones, which are attached now to the thyroglobulin, will occur. Endocytosis of these thyroglobulin molecules will occur into the follicular cell, and then from follicular cells proteolysis of the thyroglobulin will occur, which will release the T3 and T4 into the blood, and then they will be transferred by means of proteins, for example thyroid binding globulin and albumin into the blood. So in summary, we studied the brief anatomy of the thyroid gland. We said that it has two lobes, that is right lobe and left lobe, which are connected by means of isthmus, which is the middle portion, and this thyroid gland is located in the neck region. And then we discussed also the histology of the thyroid gland. We said that it has two types of cells, follicular cell and parafollicular cells. Follicular cells makes your thyroid hormone T3 and T4, and parafollicular cells makes up calcitonin. Then we discussed the functions of the thyroid hormones, and the functions of thyroid hormone we said include their effect on the brain development, their effect on the growth, and we also said that it has a role in controlling your heart rate, it has a role in controlling your reproductive functions, and it has a role in also controlling to some extent your body temperature, because all these things are altered in conditions like hyper and hypothyroidism. We also said that it has a role in controlling your digestive system, metabolism. So that was just summary of functions of thyroid gland. Then we discussed about the feedback loop mechanism, and there we said that we have how hypothalamus drives control over the anterior pituitary by means of thyrotropin releasing hormone. Then we have thyroid stimulating hormone released from anterior pituitary, and finally thyroid stimulating hormone affects thyroid gland to release the thyroid hormones, and this is how finally thyroid hormones are formed, and the level of thyroid hormones also ultimately then affect the further synthesis or stoppage from the uh, hypothalamus and anterior pituitary to either increase the further release, or if the level of thyroid hormone is less, hypothalamus will be stimulated to form more, and if you have sufficient thyroid hormone in the blood, negative feedback mechanism will stop the further secretions from the hypothalamus and anterior pituitary of TSH to stop the further stimulation of the thyroid gland, and consequently less thyroid hormones will be then produced. And finally we discuss the synthesis of the thyroid hormone. Synthesis of thyroid hormones comprises of major steps, which included iodide trapping, then we have oxidation of the iodide into iodine, then we discuss the oxidation and then iodination of the tyrosine residue of the thyroglobulin, which form the monoiodotyrosine and diiodotyrosine. Then we discuss their coupling step, which formed thyroid, that is hormones, which included T3 and T4. And finally we discussed how the endocytosis and proteolysis occur, and finally the release of those hormones into the blood. So this is just a summary of whatever we studied regarding the thyroid gland. Hope this helps, and if you have any question you can ask in the comments.